almost no one truly understands: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, sloth. For centuries, these 7 words have appeared in sermons, paintings, poems, courtrooms, horror films, political speeches, and private confessions. They have been carved into cathedral walls and transformed into monsters in popular culture. They have been blamed for the collapse of kingdoms, the corruption of institutions, the destruction of families, and the quiet ruin of individual lives. But here is the mystery. The Bible never presents them as a single official list called the 7 deadly sins. There is no hidden stone tablet on which these 7 names were written together. No single prophet announced them. Jesus did not recite them as a numbered code. The list was assembled gradually, altered repeatedly, translated across languages, and reshaped by people living centuries apart. And its earliest known form did not contain 7 sins. It contained 8 dangerous thoughts. They were first studied not in the palaces of Europe, but in the heat and isolation of the Egyptian desert, where men had deliberately removed themselves from society in the hope of escaping temptation. Instead, they discovered something unsettling. The temptations had followed them. They had left behind markets, theaters, political rivalries, luxurious banquets, and crowded streets. But in their silent cells, they still encountered appetite, anger, fantasy, resentment, ambition, boredom, and despair. The desert did not eliminate the darkness, and what those early observers recorded may have been more than a religious doctrine. It may have been one of history's earliest attempts to map the patterns through which human desire turns against the person experiencing it. So what were the 7 deadly sins originally meant to describe? Were they supernatural threats, psychological observations, instruments of social control, or warnings about impulses every human being carries? And if they belong to a distant religious world, why do they seem almost perfectly designed for ours? To find the beginning, we must travel back more than 16 centuries to a place where the sun could become an enemy. In the 4th century, the deserts of Egypt became home to growing communities of Christian ascetics. Some lived together. Others chose near total solitude. They fasted, prayed, worked with their hands, and subjected their thoughts to relentless examination. The popular image of these desert monks is peaceful, a quiet figure beneath an endless sky, liberated from the noise and corruption of civilization. The surviving writings reveal something more intense. The desert was understood as a battlefield, not a battlefield of armies, but of attention. A monk might sit alone for hours, apparently motionless, while internally struggling with memories, fears, cravings, fantasies, and arguments. A meal imagined in the morning could dominate the mind by noon. An insult remembered from years earlier could suddenly feel present. A desire to become holy could secretly transform into a desire to be admired for holiness. One of the most influential observers of this inner conflict was Evagrius Ponticus. Born in the 4th century and educated within the intellectual world of the Eastern Roman Empire, Evagrius eventually entered the Egyptian monastic tradition. There, he developed a systematic account of what he called the logos moi, recurring thoughts or mental patterns capable of disturbing and directing the mind. His list contained 8: gluttony, sexual temptation, love of money, sadness, anger, acedia, vainglory, pride. These were not simply 8 forbidden actions. Evagrius was attempting to describe movements of thought before they became actions. The danger began with an image, a memory, an expectation, or a private argument. The thought returned, attention fed it, emotion gathered around it. Eventually, the person could begin to see the world through it. In that sense, the earliest ancestor of the 7 deadly sins was not primarily a list of crimes. It was a theory of captivity. The human mind, Evagrius believed, could lose its freedom long before the body visibly did anything wrong. A person might appear calm while being governed by anger. Another might own very little while being obsessed with wealth. A monk might abandon ordinary society and still hunger desperately for status among other monks. The external object could change. The internal pattern remained. First clue in our investigation. The ancient writers were not warning only against pleasure. They were warning against domination, the moment when a natural impulse becomes powerful enough to reorganize perception. Hunger is not gluttony, attraction is not lust, rest is not sloth, anger is not automatically wrath. The problem begins when one desire becomes so absolute that everything else must serve it. But among Evagrius's 8 thoughts, one appears stranger than the others: acedia. It is often translated today as sloth, yet ordinary laziness captures only a fraction of its original meaning. For the isolated monk, acedia was associated with the middle of the day, when the sun seemed motionless and the remaining hours appeared unbearable. The person afflicted by it could become restless, disgusted with his surroundings, resentful of his responsibilities, and convinced that meaningful life existed somewhere else. He might stare toward the entrance of his cell, hoping that someone would arrive. He might repeatedly calculate the distance of the sun from the horizon. He might imagine leaving for another community where people were kinder, work was easier, and spiritual progress would come more naturally. Acedia did not always make a person passive. Sometimes it made him busy with everything except the life directly in front of him. That distinction matters. The ancient noonday demon was not simply the desire to sleep. It was the urge to escape commitment, especially when commitment had become repetitive, difficult, or emotionally unrewarding. The cell had not necessarily become meaningless. The monk had temporarily lost the ability to experience its meaning. Anyone who has opened one application to avoid beginning an important task, moved to another, checked a message, watched a short video, searched for something unnecessary, and then wondered where the hour had gone may recognize a distant echo of this ancient description. But we must be careful. Modern exhaustion, depression, attention disorders, chronic illness, and burnout cannot responsibly be reduced to moral failure. The ancient categories were created in a world without contemporary medicine or neuroscience. To use sloth as a weapon against people whose energy or motivation is affected by illness would misunderstand both human suffering and the limits of the old framework. Still, the description of acedia remains disturbing because it identifies a state that is neither simple tiredness nor deliberate rebellion. It is the inability to remain present to what one has chosen. And in the desert, presence was everything. Evagrius also made another observation that would echo through later centuries. These thoughts did not always attack independently. One could prepare the way for another. An obsession with comfort could produce frustration. Frustration could become anger. Anger could lead to fantasies of escape. Failed ambition could become sadness. Spiritual achievement could produce vainglory. And the attempt to defeat every other temptation could end in the final temptation, pride in having defeated them. The person who believed himself safest might therefore be in the greatest danger, because pride could wear the clothing of virtue. This was not a doctrine designed for obvious villains. It was a warning addressed to people who believed they were pursuing goodness. That may explain why the system survived. A simple moral code divides the world into those who obey and those who break the rules. The 8 thoughts suggested something less comfortable. The search for virtue itself could be corrupted from within. Evagrius's writings circulated through Eastern Christian monastic traditions, but the ideas did not remain in Egypt. In the early 5th century, John Cassian helped carry a related system into the Latin-speaking West. Cassian had encountered Eastern monastic practices and later wrote extensively about the discipline of monastic life. In his account, the 8 troubling thoughts became 8 principal faults. The change in vocabulary was subtle but important. A thought could arrive without permission. A fault suggested a pattern for which a person might bear increasing responsibility. Cassian discussed gluttony, sexual vice, avarice, anger, dejection, acedia, vainglory, and pride, treating them almost like enemy commanders with recognizable strategies. He also believed that self-knowledge was difficult precisely because these patterns could disguise themselves. A person might call greed prudence. He might call wrath justice. He might call pride self-respect. He might call envy discernment. He might call fear wisdom. He might even call avoidance peace. The moral danger was not merely that people desired harmful things. It was that they could create noble explanations for destructive desires. The 6th century, the list underwent its most famous transformation. Gregory the Great, who became Bishop of Rome in 590, inherited a tradition in which 8 principal patterns were already being discussed. In his moral writings, Gregory reorganized the material. Pride was treated as a deep root from which other vices could emerge. His principal vices included vainglory, envy, anger, melancholy or sadness, avarice, gluttony, and lust. Over time, sadness was increasingly joined to acedia, while vainglory was absorbed into pride. The familiar Western list of 7 gradually took shape: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. The transformation from 8 to 7 was not the discovery of a forgotten divine equation. It was an act of interpretation. Different thinkers grouped the tendencies differently because human motives overlap. Is the desire for admiration a separate vice, or is it one expression of pride? Is destructive sadness its own category, or part of the paralysis of acedia? Does envy emerge from pride, or does pride grow from comparison? The boundaries were never as clean as later posters and illustrations made them appear. Gregory described the principal vices as leaders capable of bringing armies of secondary wrongdoing behind them. This is the meaning hidden inside the traditional term capital sin. Capital comes from the Latin idea of the head. A capital vice is a head, a source, a commanding tendency from which other actions can grow. The word did not originally mean that every momentary experience of one of these emotions was automatically the worst possible spiritual offense. Even within Catholic teaching, capital and mortal are not simply interchangeable categories. The 7 are called capital because they can generate other vices, while the gravity of a particular act depends on additional moral conditions. This may be one of the greatest misunderstandings surrounding the entire tradition. The 7 deadly sins were not 7 isolated buttons that instantly condemned a person whenever touched. They were 7 directions in which character could become deformed. The number already carried enormous symbolic weight. 7 days marked the creation cycle in Genesis. Ancient cultures observed 7 visible celestial wanderers. Biblical text repeatedly used 7 to signify fullness, completion, covenant, judgment, and restoration. Medieval Christianity organized many teachings around memorable numerical structures. 7 virtues, 7 gifts of the Spirit, 7 petitions of the Lord's Prayer, 7 works of mercy in later traditions. 7 made the system teachable. A preacher could remember it, an artist could paint it, a poet could build a journey around it. An audience with limited access to books could carry it in memory. But memorability came with a price. A flexible map gradually began to look like a fixed supernatural catalog. By the Middle Ages, the vices had reached the monastery and entered the public imagination. They appeared in sermons, morality plays, sculpture, manuscript illumination, poetry as of judgment. They could be represented as animals, demons, distorted human figures, or branches growing from a poisoned tree. The inner struggle became visible. Pride might appear crowned and elevated. Greed clutched money. Gluttony leaned over a table. Wrath raised a weapon. Envy watched another person's happiness with a hostile face. Sloth slept or turned away from duty. Lust pursued a body while losing sight of a soul. The images were direct because they had to communicate in an age when much of the population could not read complex theological works. Yet the greatest medieval thinkers did not always treat the sins so simply. Thomas Aquinas asked whether the traditional 7 had been counted appropriately. His answer was not that 7 was a magical number. He argued that these vices could be understood as major sources of misdirected pursuit and avoidance. Human beings seek goods and flee suffering. The difficulty is that a limited good can be treated as ultimate, or a necessary difficulty can be rejected at any cost. Wealth is useful, but the desire for wealth can become limitless. Food sustains life, but appetite can become detached from nourishment. Recognition helps people participate in a community, but recognition can become an addiction. Anger can respond to injustice, but it can also become a pleasure in punishment. Rest restores a person, but escape can become a refusal to love anything demanding. The problem is not always the object itself, it is the loss of proportion. Early 14th century, Dante Alighieri gave the 7 vices one of their most enduring dramatic forms. In the Divine Comedy, the mountain of purgatory is organized around the purification of disordered love. Souls ascend through terraces associated with pride, envy, wrath, sloth, avarice, gluttony, and lust.
What deep pain are you
This detail is often misunderstood. The 7 are not simply arranged as chambers in hell where cartoon punishments are assigned to permanently evil people. In Dante's Purgatory, the souls are moving. They are learning. Their condition is painful, but it is not hopeless. The mountain transforms the catalog into a journey. The proud learn to bow. The envious, who looked at others with hostility, must rediscover relationship. The wrathful move through darkness produced by rage. The slothful relearn purposeful movement. Those attached to wealth are turned away from the objects that dominated them. The gluttonous confront uncontrolled appetite. Those ruled by lust pass through purifying fire. Whatever one believes about Dante's theology, the psychological structure is unmistakable. The person is not reduced forever to the vice. The vice is something that has distorted the person and must be unlearned. And this brings us to the central mystery. Why did these particular categories survive when so many other medieval classifications disappeared? Perhaps because each one describes a paradox. Every deadly sin begins with something that is not entirely evil. Pride grows from the need for dignity. Greed grows from the need for security. Lust grows from desire and connection. Envy grows from the ability to recognize value. Gluttony grows from appetite. Wrath grows from the response to injury. Sloth grows from the need for rest and relief. The ancient warning is therefore not that human beings possess monstrous impulses alien to normal life. The warning is that normal needs can become monstrous when they reject every limit. Consider pride. In popular language, pride can mean healthy satisfaction, cultural belonging, or the refusal to accept humiliation. There is nothing inherently destructive about recognizing one's worth or taking joy in honest achievement. The vice traditionally called pride is something different. It is not simply believing that one has value. It is needing reality to confirm a preferred image of oneself. Pride becomes dangerous when correction feels like annihilation, when apology feels like defeat, and when another person's knowledge feels like a threat. It does not always announce itself through boasting. It may appear as the quiet conviction that one's motives are purer, one's suffering is deeper, one's judgment is clearer, or one's group is naturally superior. The proud person may not constantly speak about greatness. He may simply become unable to receive information that challenges him. This makes pride difficult to expose because every accusation can be converted into proof of persecution. Every failure can be blamed on others. Every victory can be interpreted as confirmation of exceptional status. The mind builds a courtroom in which it serves as defendant, lawyer, witness, and judge, and it never loses. Modern research distinguishes several forms of arrogance, including exaggerated beliefs about one's own ability, comparative superiority, and antagonistic attitudes toward others. These are not identical to the ancient theological category, but they support an old observation. Pride is not only a feeling of elevation. It can become a structure that interferes with accurate self-assessment and cooperation, tains another trap. The campaign against pride can itself become pride.
These find a good home.
A person may perform humility in order to be praised as humble. He may speak constantly about his flaws while secretly controlling how others respond. He may reject recognition publicly while resenting anyone who fails to offer it privately. The ego does not disappear simply because it learns religious or moral language. It becomes bilingual. This may be why early writers placed pride near the deepest level of the problem. Appetite is easier to identify. Pride can take possession of the attempt to conquer appetite. It can turn goodness into theater, and once identity depends on superiority, envy is never far away. Envy is often confused with wanting what someone else has. But simple desire is not necessarily envy. You may see another person's skill and feel inspired to develop your own. You may see a stable family, a successful project, or a beautiful home, and recognize something genuinely valuable. Envy begins when another person's possession of a good becomes painful in itself. The other person's no longer the entire issue. The other person's happiness becomes an injury. Greed says, I want more. Envy says, your having more diminishes me. Sometimes envy attempts to solve this pain by imitation. Sometimes it seeks to discredit the person being envied. Their success must have been dishonest. Their marriage must be secretly miserable. Their kindness must be manipulation. Their talent must be luck. Their beauty must be artificial. Their popularity must be undeserved. The envious mind becomes an investigator working backward from a predetermined verdict. The evidence must prove that the admired person is not truly admirable. And if no evidence exists, imagination can manufacture it. This does not mean every criticism is envy. Powerful people can behave badly. Public success can be built on exploitation. Skepticism is often necessary. The question is more private. Would the criticism remain if the comparison disappeared? Would we still care about the alleged injustice if we did not feel personally diminished by the person involved? Envy hides because it is ashamed of its own logic. Few people openly say, "I am unhappy because someone innocent is flourishing." Instead, envy recruits moral language. It portrays resentment as principle and hostility. The medieval thinkers understood envy as profoundly relational. It isolates the person from the good of others. A friend's victory becomes difficult to celebrate. A sibling's achievement reopens an old hierarchy. A stranger's carefully selected image becomes a verdict on one's entire life. In earlier centuries, comparison was limited by geography. A farmer might compare himself with neighboring farmers. A craft worker might compare herself with others in the same town. Today, a person can compare an ordinary morning with the most carefully edited moments of thousands of lives before getting out of bed. The technology is new, the wound is not. But envy also reveals information. It may point toward a neglected desire. The person who envies another's freedom may feel trapped. The person who envies another's friendships may feel lonely. The person who envies another's courage may be grieving his own hesitation. The emotion can therefore become either poison or evidence. It can demand that another person be reduced, or it can reveal what needs attention within the self. The old tradition called envy deadly not because comparison occasionally hurts, but because repeated resentment can make love of another person's good increasingly impossible. Once another person's existence feels like an offense, wrath begins to seem reasonable. Anger is among the most morally complicated of the 7 categories. Without anger, human beings might tolerate cruelty that should be confronted. Anger can signal that a boundary has been crossed. It can energize resistance, protect the vulnerable, and interrupt indifference. The ancient and medieval writers knew that not every form of anger was identical. The danger lay in anger that escaped proportion, reason, and concern for justice. Wrath does not merely want a wrong corrected. It wants the offender to suffer. And often, suffering becomes more important than correction. The wrathful mind produces an extraordinary sense of clarity. Nuance disappears, motives become obvious. The enemy is entirely guilty. The self is entirely justified. Delay feels cowardly. Restraint feels like betrayal. This clarity is emotionally powerful because uncertainty is painful. Wrath offers relief. It turns a complicated world into a target. The target may be a person, a political group, a religious community, a generation, a nation, a family member, or an anonymous stranger. Once chosen, everything connected to the target is interpreted negatively. Neutral actions become suspicious. Mistakes become evidence of permanent character. Apologies become manipulation. Silence becomes guilt. Wrath can even survive the disappearance of its original cause. The person begins by being angry about something. Eventually, he needs something to remain angry about. Modern psychological research separates anger as an emotion from aggression as behavior, while also examining how difficulties with emotional regulation can increase aggressive responses. Studies do not support the simplistic idea that feeling anger automatically makes someone violent. They do suggest that the ways people interpret, regulate, rehearse, or intensify anger matter greatly. Ion protects us from 2 dangerous errors. The first is treating all anger as sinful, which can silence people facing abuse or injustice. The second is treating all anger as righteous, which allows cruelty to disguise itself as courage. Wrath is most dangerous when it becomes enjoyable. The humiliating reply receives applause. The public downfall feels satisfying. An opponent's becomes entertainment. The original concern may have been legitimate, yet the emotional reward gradually shifts from protecting the good to witnessing destruction. At that point, justice is no longer guiding anger. Anger is using justice as permission, and after prolonged anger comes exhaustion. This brings us back to sloth, or more accurately, acedia. In modern imagery, sloth is often shown as someone sleeping on a couch while responsibilities accumulate. But sleep may be exactly what an exhausted person needs. Rest is not a moral defect. Human beings are not machines, and productivity is not the measure of human worth. The older concept is more elusive. Acedia is resistance to meaningful effort because the meaning can no longer be felt. It can appear as indifference, but it can also appear as constant distraction. The person does not necessarily do nothing. He may do 100 minor things to avoid the one task that asks something real from him. He reorganizes the room instead of writing the letter. He researches tools instead of beginning the work. He plans a new life instead of inhabiting the present one. He waits to feel inspired before acting, then interprets the absence of inspiration as evidence that the commitment was false. The ancient monk looked toward the door of his cell. The modern person refreshes a screen. Both are waiting for something outside themselves to rescue them from the ordinary difficulty of remaining. Yet there is a serious ethical danger in applying this category carelessly. A person with depression may want to act and be unable to summon the necessary energy. A person with chronic pain may appear inactive while enduring an exhausting internal struggle. Someone with a neurological condition may experience changes in motivation that cannot be corrected by accusation or shame. Modern knowledge complicates old moral judgments, and it should. Compassion is not the enemy of responsibility. It is one of the conditions for using responsibility honestly. A moral framework that cannot distinguish unwillingness from illness will punish people for symptoms they did not choose. But the existence of illness does not make acedia meaningless. There are also moments when a person possesses the ability to act but repeatedly refuses the discomfort attached to meaningful action. The refusal becomes habitual. The habit gradually narrows life. The ancient warning is not that we must be productive every moment. It is that a life organized entirely around avoiding difficulty may eventually lose the capacity for devotion. Nothing worth loving remains easy forever. Friendship becomes inconvenient. Family becomes demanding. Study becomes repetitive. Craft becomes frustrating. Faith becomes silent. Citizenship becomes exhausting. Even freedom requires maintenance. Acedia whispers that commitment should be abandoned whenever it stops producing immediate emotional reward. Greed offers a different promise. Do not abandon the world. Possess more of it. Greed is usually associated with money, but the ancient category was broader than a pile of coins. It concerned an appetite for acquisition that could not recognize enough. Enough wealth, enough property, enough influence, enough attention, enough protection against an uncertain future. The greedy person may possess almost nothing, yet organize his entire imagination around possession. Another may own more than he could use in several lifetimes and still experience every limit as deprivation. This is why greed cannot be measured only by a bank account. Circumstances matter. A poor family saving money for security is not morally equivalent to a powerful person exploiting others to increase an already enormous fortune. Desire for stability is not the same as limitless accumulation. The central question is what the desire does to every other value. Does another person become merely an obstacle, customer, competitor, employee, audience member, or source of profit? Does security become an excuse for permanent fear? Does accumulation continue after its original purpose has been satisfied? Does the person own the possession, or has the possession begun to own the person's attention? Greed is fueled by one of the deepest facts of human existence. The future cannot be controlled. Money can reduce many dangers. It can provide shelter, education, healthcare, mobility, and time. Pretending otherwise would romanticize poverty, but no amount of wealth can eliminate mortality, uncertainty, betrayal, illness, or loss. When money is asked to provide absolute safety, it receives an impossible assignment, and because it always fails, the answer becomes more money. Psychological research on dispositional greed suggests a complicated picture. Greedy individuals may sometimes achieve stronger economic outcomes, yet studies have also associated greed with lower psychological well-being, more self-interested decisions, increased risk-taking, and social costs. These results do not prove that every ambitious or wealthy person is greedy. They support the distinction between purposeful achievement and a chronic desire for more that remains unsatisfied by success. Changes shape with the age. In an agricultural society, it may focus on land. In an industrial economy, factories and capital. In an information economy, data, visibility, and attention. A person may become greedy for relevance, collecting followers
The
rather
evidence
than
presented
coins.
leaves no
Another
room for
may
doubt.
hoard
The
information,
self is
refusing to
inherently
share
just,
knowledge
and
because
therefore,
usefulness provides
we are
identity.
victorious.
A leader may accumulate authority far beyond what effective leadership requires because the thought of becoming replaceable feels unbearable. The object evolves, the endlessness remains. Gluttony appears similar because it also involves excess, but its center is consumption rather than possession. Traditionally, gluttony became associated with eating and drinking beyond proper measure.
Guess what?
Over time,
I got
this
the
produced
promotion.
harsh and sometimes
We have to
cruel
celebrate
judgments,
this right
especially
now.
when outward appearance was treated as reliable evidence of inner character. It is not. Body size does not reveal a person's virtue. Eating behavior can be influenced by genetics, hormones, medication, stress, environment, illness, access to food, and many other factors. Any responsible modern discussion must reject the use of an ancient vice as a license to shame bodies or ignore medical realities. The deeper logic of gluttony is not visible size. It is the attempt to consume without truly being satisfied. Food is one possible object. So are entertainment, shopping, novelty, information, approval, and stimulation. The gluttonous pattern says that discomfort should never remain unanswered. Boredom requires a video. Sadness requires a purchase. Silence requires sound. Anxiety requires another piece of information. The end of one experience must immediately be covered by the beginning of another. Consumption becomes anesthesia. This helps explain a strange modern condition, being filled while feeling empty. A person can have access to more entertainment than any ruler in the ancient world and still find nothing worth watching. He can move through hundreds of images and remember almost none of them. She can purchase an object, enjoy the anticipation, receive it, and begin searching for the next object before the first has found a permanent place. The reward lies less in having than in approaching. Research on food reward shows how eating can be motivated not only by metabolic need but also by reward processes, and how reward-driven consumption can sometimes override signals connected to hunger and fullness. That science is far more detailed than the ancient category of gluttony, but it confirms that appetite is not governed by one simple switch. Biology, learning, environment, emotion, and self-regulation interact. Interpretation begins only after acknowledging that complexity. The question is not whether pleasure is permitted. The question is whether pleasure still enriches life or has become necessary to avoid experiencing life. A meal shared with gratitude can deepen relationship. A meal used compulsively to silence distress may reveal pain rather than wickedness. A celebration can overflow without becoming a permanent pattern. The ancient warning becomes useful only when separated from contempt. Gluttony is not a reason to hate the body. It is a reason to ask what the appetite is being forced to carry. Sometimes the hunger is not for food. It is for comfort, safety, affection, rest, meaning, or relief.
Take it, take everything.
And no amount of consumption can satisfy a
please don't
hunger
go.
it was never designed to address.
Don't leave me alone.
Lust is perhaps the most distorted and sensationalized member of the seven. In many cultural presentations, it is reduced to sexual desire itself, often accompanied by fear, shame, and unequal judgment. This has caused real harm. Natural attraction is not identical to exploitation, and the existence of desire does not make a person corrupt. The older moral concern becomes clearer when lust is understood as a way of seeing. Lust reduces a person to an experience. The other individual's interior life becomes secondary. Their hopes, boundaries, vulnerability, and dignity disappear behind the role they are expected to perform in someone else's imagination. The danger is not that the body is evil. It is that the person becomes only a body. This reduction can happen within private fantasy, commercial systems, abusive relationships, or cultures that treat desirability as the primary measure of worth. It can also affect the person doing the desiring, who may become increasingly unable to connect physical attraction with patience, responsibility, trust, and mutual recognition. Desire promises
Inner
intimacy.
appetite.
Lust can produce isolation.
emotional
The contradiction
pain
is
do you
ancient.
carry?
The person seeks closeness while training the mind to treat others as replaceable. The more replaceable others become, the harder genuine closeness becomes. There is also an uncomfortable connection between lust and power. When another person is treated as an object, consent and mutuality become obstacles rather than foundations. The desire is no longer simply to encounter beauty or share affection. It is to possess, control, consume, or confirm oneself through another. This is why the old tradition placed lust alongside greed and gluttony. All three can turn reality into material for appetite. Greed asks, what can I consume? What can I consume? Lust asks, whom can I use? But the categories overlap. A person may seek attention rather than physical contact. He may desire the status associated with being wanted. She may use relationships to prove value. What appears to be lust may contain loneliness, pride, envy, fear, or the need for control. The seven are not sealed rooms. They are connecting corridors. This becomes even clearer when we examine the entire system. Imagine a person who builds an identity around being superior. That is pride. Another person's success threatens the identity. That becomes envy. The threat produces resentment. Resentment becomes wrath. The conflict is exhausting, and meaningful work begins to feel pointless. That becomes acedia. To escape the emptiness the person consumes. Gluttony offers distraction. Consumption requires resources and increasing stimulation. Greed demands more. Human relationships become tools for relief and validation. Lust turns people into objects. Then the resulting shame becomes unbearable, so pride returns to rewrite the story. The circle closes. This is not a scientifically proven sequence that every person follows. It is a way of interpreting the ancient insight that destructive habits reproduce themselves. Gregory's image of commanding vices leading other faults like armies was dramatic, but the underlying observation remains plausible. Behavior creates conditions for more behavior of the same kind. Protect pride may require another lie. Greed may require indifference to suffering. Envy may require constant criticism. Wrath may require dehumanization. Lust may require secrecy. Gluttony may require denial. Acedia may require excuses. The original choice becomes a system of maintenance. And systems resist exposure. That may be why the ancient teachers placed such importance on naming the thought early. Once the thought becomes identity, questioning it feels like self-destruction. But naming creates distance. I am experiencing envy is not the same as I am an envious person and cannot change. I feel anger is not the same as anger must decide what I do. I want recognition is not the same as I am entitled to admiration. Between impulse and identity, there may be a narrow space in which freedom survives. Yet before accepting the 7 deadly sins as a timeless map of human nature, we must investigate the objections. The first is historical. The list was shaped inside specific religious communities, especially communities of celibate male ascetics. Their environment influenced what they noticed and how they interpreted it. Sexual desire, food, possessions, obedience, reputation, and perseverance carried particular meanings within monastic life. A monk who abandoned his cell represented a spiritual crisis within that system. A modern parent leaving a dangerous home may be performing an act of courage. The same outward movement can have completely different moral meanings. Context matters. The second objection is cultural. Christianity does not possess the only tradition that analyzes destructive desire. Jewish, Islamic, Buddhist, Hindu, Classical Greek, Stoic, Confucian, and many other philosophical and religious traditions developed their own languages for appetite, anger, pride, attachment, ignorance, and virtue. The similarities can be striking, but the systems are not interchangeable. To claim that the medieval Christian list is a universal scientific discovery would go beyond the evidence. It is one influential map, not the only map. The third objection is political. Moral language can be used to challenge power, but it can also protect power. Authorities may condemn the anger of the oppressed while ignoring the greed of rulers. They may preach humility to those with little power and celebrate ambition among those who dominate. They may shame personal appetite while remaining silent about institutional exploitation. A list that appears universal can be applied selectively. The poor are accused of envy. The exhausted are accused of sloth. The hungry are accused of gluttony. The angry are accused of wrath. Meanwhile, pride and greed can be renamed leadership and success. This is not merely a failure of the list. It is evidence of one of its own warnings. Pride can take control of moral judgment. The person applying the code may become blind to himself. The fourth objection comes from medicine and neuroscience. Human behavior is influenced by biology in ways ancient writers could not understand. Brain injury, neurodegenerative disease, hormonal disruption, genetic conditions, medication, trauma, and psychiatric illness can affect appetite, motivation, aggression, risk-taking, impulse control, and sexual behavior. Modern case studies and neurological research complicate any sharp boundary between a bad character and a brain undergoing change. Some behaviors traditionally labeled sinful may in particular cases be symptoms of disease or diminished control. This does not eliminate moral responsibility in every situation. It makes responsibility a more careful question. How much control did the person possess? What did they understand? What support was available? What patterns were chosen repeatedly, and what patterns arrived through illness? The answer may not be identical for every person or every moment. A humane moral investigation must leave room for uncertainty. Otherwise, the language of sin becomes a substitute for knowledge. And yet, after all these objections, the list refuses to disappear. Why? Perhaps because it does not merely describe forbidden behavior, it describes failed relationships with good things. Pride is a failed relationship with the self. Envy is a failed relationship with another person's good. Wrath is a failed relationship with injury and justice. Sloth is a failed relationship with responsibility and meaning. Greed is a failed relationship with security and possession. Gluttony is a failed relationship with pleasure and consumption. Lust is a failed relationship with desire and the human body. Seen this way, the seven are not random. They are warnings about proportion. A healthy self becomes pride when it cannot accept limits. Admiration becomes envy when another person's excellence feels intolerable. Anger becomes wrath when punishment becomes more desirable than restoration. Rest becomes sloth when escape becomes permanent. Provision becomes greed when enough becomes impossible. Pleasure becomes gluttony when consumption replaces nourishment. Attraction becomes lust when the person disappears behind the desire. The ancient system survives because each vice is close enough to something good that it can borrow the good thing's face. That is what makes it dangerous. Obvious evil rarely needs an elaborate disguise. The most persistent destructive patterns present themselves as necessary, deserved, protective, liberating, or temporary. Just one more purchase, one more victory, one more humiliating response. One more hour of avoidance, one more person used to fill the emptiness, one more reason never to apologize. And then the temporary solution becomes a way of life. This raises a darker possibility. What happens when an entire society, rather than an individual, begins to reward these patterns? Imagine an economy that depends on endless dissatisfaction. Enough would become dangerous because satisfied people stop purchasing unnecessary solutions. Imagine a media environment in which attention is captured most effectively by anger. Calm understanding would struggle against the speed of outrage. Imagine a culture of permanent comparison. Ordinary life would appear inadequate beside carefully selected images of wealth, beauty, achievement, and
Great
happiness.
spirits of the earth.
Imagine institutions in which admitting error threatens status.
We give this
Pride would no
life so
longer
that
be an
we may
individual
live.
flaw. It would become policy. Imagine entertainment that treats people as disposable objects. Lust would become a business model. Imagine abundance without restraint and exhaustion without meaningful rest. The seven ancient warnings would no longer stand outside the system condemning it. They would power the system. This does not require a secret conspiracy. No hidden council needs to meet beneath a city and vote to increase envy or wrath. Systems can amplify whatever holds attention, produces profit, protects authority, or defeats competitors. Human weaknesses become useful without anyone needing to believe in the language of sin. The result is a strange reversal. For the desert monk, temptation interrupted silence. For us, silence interrupts temptation. The monk feared the thought that returned in isolation.
It's opening up! Look out!
We live within machines capable of supplying a new thought before the previous one has ended. There is always another comparison, another desire, another accusation, another product, another image, another reason to remain awake. The ancient world lacked our technology, but it recognized the vulnerability that technology can exploit. Attention can be captured, desire can be trained, habits can become identities, and a person can mistake compulsion for freedom. This may be the deepest warning hidden within the seven deadly sins. The issue is not simply whether we break a rule. It is whether we are becoming predictable. The proud person can be controlled through flattery, the envious person through comparison, the wrathful person through provocation, the slothful person through distraction, the greedy person through promises of gain, the gluttonous person through endless supply, the lustful person through stimulation. A person governed by appetite may feel free because no external chain is visible, but the ancient writers would ask a more difficult question. Can you still say no? Not because pleasure is evil, not because ambition is evil, not because anger, rest, wealth, food, or attraction are evil. Can you say no when saying no protects something you claim to love? If you cannot, then the desire may no longer be serving you. You may be serving it. The traditional response to the 7 vices was not simply punishment. It was the cultivation opposing habits often described as virtues, against pride, humility, against greed, generosity, against lust, integrity, and respect, against envy, kindness, or gratitude, against gluttony, temperance, against wrath, patience, against sloth, diligence. These pairings can sound simplistic until we recover what virtue originally meant. A virtue was not a temporary emotion or an impressive public performance. It was a stable disposition built through repeated action. The aim was not to become incapable of desire, capable of directing desire. Humility does not require self-hatred. It requires accurate self-knowledge. Generosity does not require giving away everything without wisdom. It breaks the illusion that possession is the only source of safety. Patience does not mean tolerating abuse. It refuses to let anger destroy judgment. Temperance is not disgust toward pleasure. It allows pleasure to remain a part of life rather than becoming its ruler. Diligence is not endless labor. It is the capacity to remain faithful to meaningful work even when excitement disappears. Kindness does not deny inequality or injustice. It prevents another person's good from becoming a personal wound. Integrity does not erase desire. It insists that desire recognize another human being as more than an object. Within Catholic moral teaching, virtues are described as stable habits that order passions and guide conduct rather than annihilating emotion. The goal is self-mastery, not emotional emptiness. The ancient map and modern psychology sometimes approach one another without becoming identical. Both recognize that repeated behavior matters, attention matters, interpretation matters, environment matters. Emotion regulation matters, practice matters. A person does not become patient through one patient moment, just as a person is not permanently defined by one angry moment. Character emerges through patterns, but patterns can change. The old map becomes harmful when it is used to declare that certain people are permanently filthy, lazy, corrupt, or beyond hope. It becomes useful when it helps a person identify a pattern before that pattern becomes a prison. Perhaps this is also why the number 7 remains so powerful. 7 is small enough to remember but broad enough to interpret almost any age. The objects change. The mechanism remains recognizable. A medieval merchant hides silver beneath the floor. A modern corporation hides resources through complex accounts. A courtier seeks the king's praise. A modern creator counts approval through numbers on a screen. A neighbor envies another neighbor's field. A stranger envies a life viewed from thousands of miles away. A monk watches thus, waiting for the day to end. A modern worker watches the clock while moving between digital distractions. A ruler demands monuments. An ordinary person constructs a carefully edited identity. The stage changes. The actors continue improvising around the same desires. But perhaps we have been asking the wrong question. Perhaps the real mystery is not why human beings continue to commit the 7 deadly sins. Perhaps the mystery is why we are surprised. Each generation imagines itself more informed than the last. We possess psychological language, medical research, communication technology, historical archives, and access to more knowledge than earlier civilizations could have imagined. Yet knowledge of a pattern does not automatically free us from it. A person can understand manipulation and still be manipulated. He can recognize envy and continue feeding comparison. She can understand anger and continue rehearsing humiliation. A society can condemn greed while measuring human success almost entirely through accumulation. We do not ignore ancient warnings because they are incomprehensible. Sometimes we ignore them because they are too recognizable. They ask us to examine not only what we condemn in strangers, but what we excuse in ourselves. and self-examination is rarely as satisfying as accusation. The 7 deadly sins are easy to identify in a corrupt ruler, a cruel celebrity, an arrogant rival, or a fictional villain. The investigation becomes more difficult when the evidence leads home. When does confidence become pride? When does ambition become greed? When does righteous anger become the desire to harm? When does rest become avoidance? When does pleasure become dependence? When does admiration become resentment? When does attraction stop seeing a person? There is no instrument that measures the exact moment. No alarm sounds. The change often happens quietly. A thought is repeated. A justification is accepted. A boundary moves. Something once unthinkable becomes exceptional, then understandable, then normal. This is how character can change without announcing its departure. The ancient monks feared thoughts not because every unwanted thought revealed guilt, but because attention gives thoughts weight. What we repeatedly contemplate begins to shape what we notice. What we notice shapes what we desire. What we desire shapes what we choose. What we choose repeatedly becomes easier to choose again. Eventually, the habit speaks with the voice of identity. This is simply who I am. That sentence may be the final victory of every vice. Because once a pattern becomes identity, change feels like betrayal of the self. But the history of the 7 deadly sins contains a different possibility. The list itself changed. 8 thoughts became 8 faults. 8 were reorganized into 7. Sadness moved, vainglory merged with pride. Acedia became sloth and lost much of its original complexity. Different thinkers debated causes, categories, and remedies. The tradition was never motionless. Perhaps human beings are not motionless either. The list is ancient, but it does not prove that our failures are permanent. In its more thoughtful forms, it assumes the opposite. A vice can be recognized, a habit can be interrupted, an appetite can be reordered, a relationship can be repaired, an apology can be spoken, a possession can be released, an enemy can be seen again as human, a meaningful task can be resumed after a long period of avoidance. The purpose of a warning is not to declare that disaster has already won, it is to show where the road may lead. More than 16 centuries ago, individuals entered the desert believing distance would protect them from corruption. They discovered that the most difficult territory was not the empire they had left
We have
behind.
confirmed movement at the
It
red
was the
zone.
mind they had
Launch
carried with
surveillance
them.
drone immediately.
Today, we no longer need to enter a desert to encounter the same territory. It appears in the moment before we answer an insult, in the discomfort we feel at another person's success, in the purchase we hope will change how we feel, in the work we keep postponing, in the praise we cannot stop needing, in the appetite that promises relief but leaves us emptier, in the person we stop seeing as a person. The 7 deadly sins may not be a secret divine code or a scientifically complete theory of behavior. They are perplexed history, theology, interpretation, and debate. But perhaps their survival tells us something. Civilizations change faster than human desire. Our tools become more advanced. Our temptations become more efficient, our explanations become more sophisticated, and still, somewhere beneath the language, the same ancient question remains. Are we directing our desires, or are our desires quietly directing us? Maybe the deadliest part of these 7 patterns is not that they exist within us. Maybe it is how easily they disappear from our awareness while shaping everything we do. So look again at the ancient list: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, sloth. Which of these warnings has the modern world learned to resist, and which one have we simply renamed, rewarded, and accepted as normal? Share your perspective in the comments, and subscribe to The Last Belief, where we continue investigating the mysteries of history, religion, culture, and the unanswered questions that have followed humanity across the centuries. Because sometimes the oldest warnings are not echoes of a dead world. Sometimes they are messages addressed directly to ours.